Hello friends, today we're going to design our own custom static site generator. Sometimes I find it easier to just make my own instead of relying on another framework. Often I find myself digging around the framework's documentation for hours when I could have just implemented the feature in my own static site generator in a lot less time. So to show you what this thing is going to do, I'll open up the files, and if you look inside of source pages, I have a couple of Markdown pages. This is the preferred format I'd like to write the website in. So I have an index Markdown, which will be the main page that pulls up when you open up the website. And I also created a page too, just to show how to generate multiple files. I also have a template, which I got from tailwindtoolbox.com. I'm just using the minimal blog right now. So this is what it's going to look like. What I did was I downloaded this file, I copied it into my directory as template.html, and I just made a couple of minor changes. One of them was I added this content comment as well as a publish date comment and a title comment. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this template HTML and the data from within here and the content here and merge these all together. And what that's going to look like is if I pop open my terminal here, I'm going to say npm start. You can see it's the output is two different files I've generated in the dist folder, an index.html as well as a page2.html, and those just mimic these two pages. And I can see here in my dist I have my index and my HTML. I'm going to call npx serve dist, open up my local host, and here's my site. So this is the page that's generated from the index.md, and I've created a page 2 link up here. You can see if I click on that, it pulls up page 2. And of course that is just from pages page 2. And if I were to make a page 3, it would be easy as just creating another page 3 in here. And then I would have my third page generated. But first, I'd like to thank some of our new subscribers: Dave, Harshit, Trioxide, Rich, Luis, Anadata, Oka, and Guru. It's your support that keeps a small channel like this going, and I really do appreciate it. So thanks each and every one of you. I have a couple of things already set up just to kind of move this video along a little bit quicker. What I have here is I've set up in my scripts, I went ahead and installed NodeMon. This of course is just for development. For my build, I'm just going to include this as start, and it just runs the index file. So the first thing I always like to do is make sure my debugger is working. So I'm just going to do a console log hello world here, and I'm going to set a breakpoint, and I'm going to trigger that just by hitting F5. You can also go up here, select start debugging, or click over here and select launch. Okay, I can see it hit my breakpoint here, hello world, and that is good enough. So the first thing I want to do is to read the Markdown file. I want to process the headers, and what I mean by headers is the metadata up here. So I want to be able to get title, author, and date, as well as the content. So let's say I want to process the headers. I want to read the content, and then I want to return it all as an object. The next thing I'd like to do is inject this into the template and save the file. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to import fs. This is what I'm going to be using to import all the files. And I'm going to do this as functions. You'll see why later on, that I prefer starting everything with a function. It just makes it a lot easier to compose later. So I'm going to start with a read file function, and that's just going to take in a file name. So first I'm going to start with the raw file, and that's just going to be a read file. Oops. Read file. I'm going to use the synchronous version. I'm going to take the file name, and I want to read the UTF-8. And I'd like to see what that looks like, so I'm just going to say read file, and I'm going to say path. Oh, I got to import path up top. Join. I'm going to say path.resolve, which is going to give me the current directory, and I'm going to join that with source pages index.markdown, which is going to be this file. I'm going to set a breakpoint right here, and I'm going to start my debugger. So now if I look over raw file, I can see that it did import a bunch of stuff. The next thing I want to do is I want to parse out these headers. I'm going to install a package called gray matter. This is going to allow me to import the headers from the Markdown files. So I'm going to import matter from gray matter. And I'm going to pass the raw file into the gray matter function and then just set that as a variable called parsed. So raw file. And I'm going to run this again just to make sure it's working. So it looks like I have my raw content in here as a string. And I do have my data. This is what I was looking to parse using gray matter, is I now have access to the author, the date, and the title. Next thing I have to do is install a package called marked. This package is going to allow me to take the raw markdown, which is a string right now, pass that in and convert it into HTML. So I'm going to import marked up at the top from marked. And I'm going to say my HTML is marked. And of course my parsed had a content section, which this was the content of the raw string of the markdown. So that's what I'm going to pass in. I'm going to run my debugger again, and I'm going to look at the HTML. It's hard to see here. Let's see if it'll be easier in the debug section. So if I look at the HTML, it's not much better, but I can see here that it does have a couple of p tags, so that tells me that it is processing the markdown into HTML properly. So now what I want to do is just return this, and I'm going to return everything that is parsed, but I also want to include the HTML. Now I can check that by just saying my output is going to be this read file, and I'm going to put a breakpoint in here, run it again, step over once, and I'm going to look at my output. So I can see here I have the raw content, which here it's just the markdown as a single string. And then I also have my HTML as well as my data. So that's everything I wanted to achieve for reading the markdown file. So the next step, I'm going to import the template. So I'm going to say template is going to be fs.readFileSync path.join. And I'm going to join the current directory with src template.html, and I want this to also be read as UTF-8. I'm going to run this, just make sure it's working. Looks like my template is imported correctly. And I'm going to create a new function for this, so I'm just going to call it templatize, and it's going to take the template as well as my file. And the file is just going to be this output or the contents of read file. Actually, because template is a string, I'm just going to do search and replace on it. So I'm just going to say template.replace. I'm going to look in the template and I'm going to replace the content with the content. Actually, instead of passing in the whole file, I'm just going to use destructuring. So I'm going to say content here. And what else do I have to replace? Title and publish date. So I'm going to copy publish date and title. Okay, and just in case there's more than one of these, let's just say global. And I also have to pass in the date as well as the title. So I'm going to copy date here and title here. That should be good for our templatize function. So I'm going to say const templatized equals our templatize function, which I'm going to pass the template into that. And then I'm going to say the date is output.data.date. And I don't like output. Let's rename this to star file. Next I have to pass in the title and the contents. So the title is going to be file.data.title, and this is going to be file.contents. Let's run this. I'm going to set a breakpoint up here. Date is passed in, title, and my content. Oh, because it's called content. Okay, so let's rerun that. So template, date, title, content. So now that I have the file being imported and being converted from the Markdown string into HTML, I think it's time that I create the save file function. But before I do that, I'm going to install a package called makedir-p. And what this package is going to do is it's going to make a directory, and if that directory already exists, it's not going to fail like other make directories. So I'm going to import makedir-p at the top. And then I'm going to create a function save file. And that's just going to take a file name and the contents. And I'm going to get the directory name first. So that's going to be path.dir name with the file name. I'm going to call makedir-p sync on the directory. And then I'm going to call fs.writeFileSync with that file name and the contents. Now I can't start calling save file because I want to save the file in the dist directory, and right now the only paths I have are coming from the source directory. So I need to be able to convert this source path into a destination path. Because of the complexity of this, I'm just going to go ahead and enclose this functionality into a function. So I'm going to create a function called getOutputFileName, and that's going to take a file name as well as the out path. So in this case, the out path is going to be dist, and the file name is going to be the full path, including the source. So first I'm going to get the base name of this by just calling path.basename on the file name. And this is going to strip off the directory path and give me just the file name itself, including the extension. So I need to get rid of the extension when I create my new file name. So I'm going to take the base name and get the substring, and I'm going to take the base name .length -3. Because these are markdown files, there's going to be 3 characters in the end that I can strip off, the dot, the M, and the D. And then I'm just going to append the HTML extension that I want onto the new file name. And if I want the full path, I'm going to have to join the path of the out path, which is the dist directory, and join that with the file name. And then I can just return the out file. And at this point, it's going to make sense to pull the file name out into its own variable, just because I'm going to be passing it into multiple functions. So I'm going to say the file name is, should I just copy this whole thing right here? And then I can convert this to file name. I'm going to remove the template up top. Now I have to create my out path, which again is the dist directory. So I'm going to say path.join, path.resolve, which is the current directory, and dist. I'm going to get my out file name. It's going to be the get output file name, and I'm going to pass in the file name and my out path. I'm going to set up the debugger. I'm going to step over it and look at my out file name. Now I can finally call save file. I'm going to pass in the out file name this time, as well as the contents, which is going to be the templatized. So I'm just going to go ahead and run this, no breakpoints. And I should have a dist with my index. Excellent. So now I'm going to search. Oh, look at that. Here's my content. Here's my date timestamp, and here's my title. Looks like the replaces worked. Looks like save worked. The last piece of this is to be able to enumerate every single markdown file. And since because this is a decent amount of work here, it looks like I've got about 10 lines of code. I'm also going to turn this into a function. And it's just going to be called process file. So it's going to take the file name, which is the markdown file. It's going to take the template as well as the out path. And even though these are defined here, And if I define the function a little bit lower, they would have access to this. I like to pass everything into the function just to keep it as pure as possible, even though it's going to be doing a bunch of side effects. This is just going to allow me to move this function into an external file when this index file grows too big. Okay, so let's move all of this in here. This is actually going to move out. That's not part of the function because I'm going to call process file with the file name, and I need the template. And the last one is the out path. So I'm just going to move this out here. Okay, and just to make this consistent, I'm going to make everything lowercase file name. It looks like I over replaced. We've injected into the template, and we've also saved the file, but there's one more piece, which is to enumerate all MD files in source. And right now I'm just going to add these into a main function. And I'm going to call that main function. This just lets me to do some nice things, like if I were to need some async code later, I could just add the async keyword. I can also add a try catch around the main, which won't clutter up the code inside. And so let's see. I have the out path. So now I'm going to create a source path that's going to be similar to the out path. I like to define these up at the top just so I can see where they are and to easily change them. Then I can replace this here, and I can also replace this. Okay, and I'm noticing an error here. It's underscored, and this one looks like it's not. Oh, it's just a misspelling. Okay, excellent. Okay, so the last piece is going to be to convert this file name. Instead of hard coding the index.md, I want to pull all of the .md files from this directory. If I add any more in the future, I want it to pull those too. So I don't want anything hard coded. There's another package for that called glob. And what glob is going to do is it's going to let me write out a glob pattern that will search for these files. So I'm going to import glob up at the top. And down here, what I'm going to do in my main, so I'm just going to call this file names, and I'm going to use the synchronous version of glob, and I'm going to pass in my source path, and I'm looking for everything in pages, all the directories that contain a Markdown file. And there's our file name. So it looks like it's picking up two of them. We have our index.md and our page2.md. Now I'm going to do a file names.forEach here. And I'm just going to take the file name of each one of these and call our process file function on them. I'm going to run this. And in here I see I have my index and my page 2. Another thing I'm going to do is just do a console log here. And I'm going to just output the file name. And that way I'll have some indication of something happening here. So I'm just going to run it from the console. And I can see here that it does output my files. Now I'm going to serve the content in the dist directory just to make sure everything is working correctly. Okay, so here's my site, and I'd see my welcome static site. It does have the date, and here's the content I put in. Here's the link I put to page 2. I'm going to click on that, and here's page 2 along with, oops, what is this? Is this correct? Should this be markdownified? That's supposed to be markdown. So let's set up some breakpoints and figure out what went wrong. We are outputting our HTML here. in our read file. Oh, we don't want the content, we want HTML. So that was it. I was passing the raw content into the templatize function, but I need to pass in the HTML into it. So I'm going to call start again. Go back to our page, hit refresh, and there we go. Looks like it's working. There was some headline things in here, but I think that's just... So that is working. It is. There is an H1 and an H2. They're just not styled in this template. And if I were to run npm run dev, because this is using NodeMon, I can now close this and go into my Markdown files. Add anything I want. As soon as I hit save, I should be able to go back to my static site and see my changes immediately. So go back to my main page. Let's open up index. And we'll say welcome, welcome, welcome. And there we go. Now my static site is output all in this dist directory here. All I have to do is copy this up to a static hosting service and my site is ready to go. Obviously there's a couple of things I left out in this video. Images, which would be just a straight copy from whatever folder is here to wherever location in the dist you wanted to. There's also other things that would have been nice, which is some sort of dynamic link creation, but I'll leave the project as it is and I'll leave those features up to you to add. If you want to check out this project and play with it, there's a link to the GitHub repo in the description down below. And I'd like to thank you for making it to the end of this video and spending your time with me. I really do appreciate it. If you like this video and want to see more content like this, be sure to like and subscribe. And once again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.